All right, Andy Staples, you saw the announcement, I hope, over the weekend that he has moved to On3 Sports, still on Twitter at Andy_Staples. You'll get all his work there, though, now at On3 Sports with us now on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. First of all, Andy, congrats. We're very, very happy for you.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys sitting there answering all my stupid questions at media days last year after you went podcast. And so I just moved to another company, but my role is going to be quite a bit different than it was at The Athletic or Sports Illustrated. So it was nice getting all that intel from you guys and from some other folks who've made big changes in the business to kind of figure out, okay, can I do this? Should I do this? Do I want to do this? And this is going to be fun. This is very show based, lots of video. I'll still write some, but it's going to be a little bit different than what I was doing at SI and The Athletic.
So lay it out for us. Do you know yet about your show, your videos, your podcast, how we'll get you on a daily consumption?
Daily show, very similar to your model, where we're going to be on video every day and live on YouTube. And we're looking at kind of a 7 p.m. Central Time start. We're talking about starting right around SEC Media Days with the daily show. And then that'll be available on every podcast platform that you want as soon as we get done and it gets uploaded. So if you were listening to my old show in podcast form, you can still get that. It'll still be there for your commute every morning. It'll just have started out as a different thing, but it's going to be very similar to what you're used to.
We were talking week one, not the best lineup, week one of college football. Week two, you've got Texas heading to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. Texas, I said this, I don't know if you agree, Andy. If I'm a Texas fan, TCU just played for the national championship. If I'm a Texas fan in year 3 under Sark, I believe we should win the Big 12 and we should be in a college football playoff. What's your expectation for Texas?
So it's interesting because I was talking about this with some friends the other day about Texas, because they are, from a talent standpoint, so superior to everybody in the Big 12. Like, they should win the Big 12. And really, Alabama and Oklahoma should be kind of their only scary games. And if they don't win the rest of those, that's when you worry. But that's kind of been the problem with Texas. Like last year, they played Alabama really tough, but then they're losing games like the Oklahoma State game. They had no business losing that game. And so that's the thing. Can Steve Sarkisian get to the point where they're winning the games they're supposed to win? And a Texas that wins the games it's supposed to win this year, and you're talking 11-1, 10-2 regular season. I got to be honest for you guys. Like, if this Oklahoma team beats this Texas team, I worry about Texas long term, because Oklahoma is not where they want to be, but getting there from a personnel standpoint, and Texas is ahead of them right now in terms of personnel. I'd be worried if Oklahoma goes into the Cotton Bowl and beats Texas. So I think the expectations should be really high for Texas this year. And look, we don't know what Alabama's going to be yet. We don't know who's going to be playing quarterback. We don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. So I have no problem if anybody wants to say, Alabama's probably going to win that game in Tuscaloosa. But Texas is talented enough to play with Alabama right now. It's not something I would have said a couple of years ago, but they've recruited pretty well, especially along the offensive line in the last couple of years. And so I think they should be able to compete. If they're not competitive, then I'd be a little bit worried about Texas. Alabama's going to be competitive no matter what. Like, you don't have to worry about Alabama getting blown out or anything. So I know Alabama's going to be fine. It'll be a good measuring stick for Texas. But the ones I want to see Texas win, I want to see you beat K-State. I want to see you beat TCU. The teams that are good in the Big 12, but should not be as good as you.
Yeah, and you're going to get a lot of new schools in there too, where it's going to be their Super Bowl. It's their one shot at Texas. And I don't know that matters or not, Andy, but it's schools that are coming into the Big 12 who know they've got this 1 year, this one shot to play and beat Texas, and you always wonder how those games factor in as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I believe that, they're at Houston.
Yeah.
And because they all of those new 4 teams get Texas or Oklahoma at their place. So like at Houston is going to be a pretty raucous atmosphere. And in this case, it's probably not going to be all Texas fans. Like that's a game in the past years that said, okay, we'll play you, but we're going to move the game to NRG and it's going to be 75% Texas fans. That's not what it's going to be in this case. And like BYU comes to Austin Well, we know about the last time Texas played BYU. They fired their defensive coordinator after the game because Taysom Hill ran for so many yards. So, different eras, obviously. But you're right. Those teams are going to be dying for a shot at Texas on the way out of the Big 12.
Yeah, and with those new teams in now officially, Houston, BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati, which one of those you think eventually, we'll say 5 years, has some big impact on that new look Big 12 in the future?
I think they all could, because they're all now. BYU is a different animal because it's a national recruiting school, church-based, that sort of thing. But UCF, Cincinnati, Houston all have the same kind of profile. They're a school that is in a football crazy, talent-rich region where now they are able to recruit a little bit different caliber of player than they did. Now, Cincinnati, I think, is a really good example of this, where we can kind of extrapolate, because when Luke Fickell was at Cincinnati, he was recruiting better than Cincinnati traditionally had. He got them to take a little bit of a step up. My guess is Scott Satterfield can get the same type of, as a Big 12 coach, Scott Satterfield can get the same type of player or even a little bit better player now. And that's a team that made the college football playoff, that was dominant in its league. So they can do that. UCF can absolutely do that. You look at UCF's recruiting battles right now. They are now in the hunt for players. If you look at the other finalists, where you go, wow, UCF's in there? Well, it's because they're in the Big 12 that they're now in those hunts. Houston might be the most talent-rich town in America. I say this as someone who's from Florida, and I have a hard time saying that anywhere but South Florida is the best place to go find players. But if you just look per capita, Houston is crazy talented. And if you can build those relationships, one, you can probably out-evaluate some people in your own town, where there's some guys that maybe aren't getting recruited by A&M and Texas and Oklahoma and LSU that you can get to sign with you. But then the other thing is you can get the bounce backs, the Houston kids who go elsewhere thinking the grass is greener and want to come home. So it's hard to say. I think UCF might be the one that pops first, but at some point I can see all of those teams being competitive year in and year out in that league.
Very random question, but with expansion next year, with the new two going to the Big Ten, new two going to the SEC, who plays for their conference championship first? UCLA in the Big Ten or Oklahoma in the SEC?
Oklahoma. That's not even a question. I don't know when UCLA is ever going to play for the Big Ten title.
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
We've just got a growing theory that a lot of people believe Oklahoma's not going to be able to keep up recruiting in the SEC.
No. Listen, Oklahoma this will be the fourth conference that they're in the third conference that they're in for a long time. Big 8, Big 12, SEC. They've always been good. Oklahoma is always good. They have a little dip in the mid 90s, late 90s. That's it for the entirety of their football program. The only school that's been more consistent than Oklahoma in terms of putting a winner on the field is Ohio State. Everybody else has had these roller coasters, even Alabama, even the powers in the SEC have had that. But Oklahoma has been more consistent. So if you're telling me that they won't be able to figure out how to win at the same level as LSU and Alabama, I don't believe that, because they've always been able to win everywhere they've been. Like, now you say Texas, I'm gonna give you a different answer, because Texas has not been able to do that historically, but Oklahoma has. So yeah, that's the easiest question in the world, because Oklahoma's going to play for an SEC title at some point down the line. I'm not sure UCLA ever will.
Andy Staples is with us on 3 Sports. At Andy_Staples is where you follow him on Twitter. It has always baffled me, though, why UCLA and USC can be in the same city. They're separated by a lot of traffic, a lot of miles, but they're in the same city, right. Andy. One is a state school, one is a private school. Normally you would say state school has that advantage. Not so in this case. I have never really understood what stands in UCLA's way.
Well, in the current era, the state school part is actually tougher on them. Like, you'd think the state school thing would make it easier. The private school thing makes it easier for USC. USC still has a fairly high standard. It's a pretty good academic school, but they can be a little more loose. The Power 5 University of California system schools in California, so UCLA and Cal, they've got to be pretty selective academically with who they take. They can't take just anybody. And it does force them to recruit from a little bit smaller pool. Now, you look back when Jim Mora coached there, he was getting some dudes. There would be players that were highly rated, wound up being really good players, but he couldn't fill a whole roster with them. Like Pete Carroll filled a whole roster with them at USC. And I think Lincoln Riley is going to be able to do that too. So I'm not sure UCLA, though, is ever going to be able to have that kind of depth unless there's some sort of change in how they're allowed to recruit.
Andy Staples On3 Sports with us. His video platform grows starting SEC Media Days in 12 days. We'll be in Nashville, as everyone will be. This is about as wide open as I've seen the SEC West in a while. And by wide open, I mean in the final year of the West, it's not a given that Alabama's going to walk away as the favorite. Your chance of saying that LSU is the favorite when we leave Nashville?
LSU is going to be voted by the media as the favorite. I said the media, even though I'm part of it, because I always forget to turn in my ballot. So you can never actually blame me because I always forget. But I think LSU will be picked as the favorite in the West. And with good reason. They won the West last year. They bring a lot back. Alabama has questions at quarterback. The other part of the West, and this is the wild card, Texas A&M is a boom or bust situation. Texas A&M's starting lineup can compete with anybody. And if they can stay healthy, they can beat anybody. They beat LSU last year. They almost beat Alabama last year. And they had a horrible season. But they also could be a complete tire fire. So we don't know what's going to happen with them. Arkansas is going to be sneaky good because KJ Jefferson's back. Rocket Sanders is back. Hugh Freeze at Auburn. That makes things really interesting. Now, I don't think Auburn's going to be in a position where it can win the division in the last year of the division. But I do think that they could be in a position where they could beat some people. I mean, you saw when Hugh got to Ole Miss, they became a team that was a scary upset problem pretty quickly. And then he started getting, your Laramie Tunsil's, your Robert Kimdiches, and they became one of the better teams on that side. He has a chance to do that at Auburn. Now, he had to do some serious roster resurrection at Auburn right now. I don't expect them to be able to compete game in, game out. That said, if I'm a defensive coordinator in the West right now, I do not want to see them because his offenses always work. When have you seen a Hugh Freeze offense that didn't work?
Never.
He's always got that. The one thing that worries me about Hugh Freeze, and I'm not saying this will definitely carry over from Ole Miss, but every year, Andy, it seemed like at Ole Miss when he had good teams, there was always that one game, and you're like, what?
Oh, yeah.
Like I remember, I think in 14 it was Arkansas. They just got blasted by Arkansas. They were a top 10 team. They go to Florida.
In 15 it was Florida.
Yeah,
they went down to Gainesville and got destroyed.
Yeah. And it was just always a head scratcher with him.
Yeah, and I think that's when you can't put together an Alabama or Georgia type roster, you're going to have games like that. It's inevitable that you're going to have a game where a team that has similar talent to you can beat you. And that's what they ran into. So I think that's now what Hugh Freeze can do at Auburn that's different than Ole Miss is you can build a roster as deep potentially as Alabama, as Georgia. It's not easy, especially with Billy Napier trying to do the same thing at Florida, Jimbo trying to do the same thing at A&M, Brian Kelly trying to do the same thing at LSU, but it's possible at Auburn. And that's what I'm curious about is can he build that kind of depth to be a contender year in and year out?
On3 Sports is on fire, and part of that is acquiring the talents of Andy Staples.
And we don't need no water.
Wow, that was really good. At Andy_Staples, On3 Sports is where you'll get all his content there. Andy, we'll see you in a couple of weeks up in Nashville. Congrats again.
I cannot wait. More dumb questions coming your way.
Take care.